Doctor Who season by season. New Who: The Specials Year. The Specials Year, or season, of televised fan fiction New Who, which wasn't a real season and lasted a little bit over a year, is generally accepted to have run from Christmas 2008 to New Year's Day 2010. It consisted of 5 special, extra-long episodes that marked the swan song of David Tennant as the 10th Doctor and Russell T Davies as showrunner of the new series. The first special was the 2008 Christmas special The Next Doctor, which both the title and plot have toyed with an audience that was already aware that David Tennant would shortly be leaving the role of the Doctor by including another character, played by David Morrissey, who was apparently a future incarnation, possibly the next Doctor. Of course, all of this turns out to be nothing but a gimmick, as the character is actually a perfectly ordinary human being who has encountered a futuristic device and experienced a traumatic emotional shock that, in fact, has just him believing that he is the Doctor. To be fair, this plot is actually quite interesting and effective and even touching, and Morrissey is good in the role. The problem with the next Doctor is that Davies pretty much resolves this plot and loses interest in this character at around the 40-minute mark and, apparently scared shitless that the mainstream audience will get bored of an atmospheric character story at Christmas, spends the next 20 minutes indulging in loud, obnoxious, CGI-laden modern Hollywood blockbuster shite of the worst kind. He even botches what should have been a major moment for the faux Doctor, whose real name is Jackson Lake, by having the rescue of his son not performed by Jackson in a moment of redemption and real heroism, but instead as yet another feat of daring-do from Tennant. Lame and badly written. All in all, The Next Doctor is not the worst Christmas special. It's certainly more watchable than Voyage of the Talentless or any of Moffat Watt's painful bowel movements. But the last 20 minutes do rather ruin what was shaping up to be a reasonable enough bit of fluff. The next special was Planet of the Dead, which was broadcast during the Easter weekend in 2009, though aside from the Doctor eating an Easter egg during the opening scene, the date was otherwise pretty much completely ignored. Planet of the Dead is an extremely unpopular story, even with New Who, Davies and Tennant fans, which is odd, as I, do not mind it that much. I mean, do not get me wrong. By no stretch of the imagination could you ever call it good Doctor Who or good television, but on the other hand it doesn't make me want to tear my own face off like a good proportion of Series 2 and Series 4 does. It's a stupid but watchable enough bit of dumb fluff that does nothing particularly interesting but nothing particularly egregious either. Instantly forgettable but largely inoffensive. The next special was The Waters of Mars, which was a very different kettle of fish than the very lightweight Planet. Waters of Mars aired in the middle of November 2009, though the tone is such that one might have assumed the Who production team thought it would go out on Halloween. Waters of Mars is easily the best of the special season, with strong production values, scary monsters and a nicely doom-laden tone, but it is not without its flaws. Most of these flaws relate to the controversial ending, which sees the always bipolar 10th Doctor apparently completely flip his lid and lose his shit altogether. The Doctor defying the laws of time to save the crew isn't a bad idea in itself, but Tennant's crazy performance is, and even worse is the scene afterwards on Earth. Tennant's performance and the tone of the scene is really strange, almost suggesting that the Doctor really has not just gone nuts but turned out and out evil. Even stranger is Adelaide offing herself to preserve the timeline, which is, you know, pretty much completely the contrary to how any actual human being would ever actually act. The tone of the scene is so weird too that, to be honest, I was more expecting Adelaide to take a shot at the Doctor rather than herself. That would probably have made more sense too. Of course, Adelaide bizarrely offing herself and an Ood materializing for no apparent reason seems to jolt the Doctor back to his senses. What senses this incarnation has anyway, and he goes from crazy evil to just back to his normal whiny self-pitying self again. Waters is a decent, well-made and creepy story for the most part, but the ending, which appears to be done for no reason other than shock value and is then completely taken back again a minute later, rather mars, no pun intended, what is otherwise by far the best of the specials. The final two specials, aired on Christmas Day 2009 and New Year's Day 2010, make up the two-part The End of Time that closes the Tennant and Davis era of New Who. And boy is it a clusterfuck of epic proportions. The worst regeneration story to this point, although it may well have been beaten since by the diabolically dull The Time of the Doctor. The End of Time is a shameless exercise in embarrassing self-indulgence and just plain bad writing. Even the opening narration of the first episode is hideously bad. These people were having bad dreams, well, not this guy, but none of them remembered them, well, except this guy, but he remember them clearly or some such fifth grade shite. Diabolical stuff from a supposedly professional writer. The rest of the script is not much of an improvement. John Sim is back as the Master and, unlike some old-school fans, I rather liked him the first time, but there's no denying how bad he is here. It's not entirely down to him, as the Master gobbling food and then jumping around and spraying lightning from his hands like a bad Marvel comic book movie villain is entirely the fault of the script, but Sim seems to be permanently set on wacky, but without any of the traces of genuine menace and sadism that were there in his first story. He's just fucking annoying here, and the massive retcon that the Master was only crazy and evil in the first place because of the Time Lords and the Time War is just awful and insultingly offensive to the character. Davis smearing his shit over the show's history in a way that would become insultingly familiar during his successor's era. The plotless, characterless mess that is this abomination of a story concludes with the nauseatingly sentimental and self-indulgent last 20 minutes of a remarkably healthy-looking dying doctor visiting old friends before blubbing like a baby and going I do not want to go, with a hilariously constipated look on his face that is one of the worst set of scenes in the entire history of the series. Indeed, the whole of the Doctor's behavior in his regeneration, kicking off with his bile-ridden rant at Wilf, you stupid old fuck, now I've got to sacrifice myself for your worthless hide when you'll probably die in your sleep anyway next year. What a cunt you are is just awful and a summation of why I ended up disliking this Doctor so much. Because he is, to be blunt, an arse. Then, mercifully, Matt Smith arrives, likable, quirky and funny, and you breathe a sigh of relief. Everything's going to be alright. Well, for about a season anyway. The special season is a very mixed bag, veering between okay and terrible with only a brief diversion into decent here and there. I do not hate it as much as some fans do, or as much as some of the real New Who seasons, but it's not exactly a show on the top of its game either. I give the specials year a D-.